Wel, am y gyfeillion bore da, diolch yn fawr am y cyflwyniad mor caredig na pleser mawr I fi cael y cyfle I siarad â chi I gyd bore yma. So I begin in the Welsh language simply to illustrate the fact that there are so many themes, as you have already heard this morning, which could be highlighted in addressing the theme of the seminar. The future of the metropolis, a metropolis in which we are able to be human, stay human, be sustainable and stay sustainable. And I could indeed have devoted the whole time I have in talking to you about the nature of language and its importance to us in terms of our human identity and the way in which in the Basque Country and in Wales we work together to sustain those languages which are so important to us in our particular parts of the world as part of our identity, as part of our challenge to remain human and sustainable. I could have talked very easily to you about the challenges of the crisis in biodiversity, the challenge of climate change, and I could as well have talked about the way in which regional governments have a part to play on that wider world stage. Indeed, this is the third occasion this month that I've been lucky enough to be able to speak to an international audience. I was in Brussels on the first day of March, St. David's Day, the day, our national day in Wales. I was in Paris last weekend and here in Bilbao today. And part of that indeed is a conscious effort on the part of the Welsh Government in what have been difficult times to go on demonstrating that for Wales, leaving the European Union is quite certainly not to stop being European. Wales is a European nation, proudly so. Our face turned outward to the world, welcoming people from Europe and beyond who have chosen to come and make their futures part of our future in Wales. So those are just three of the topics that I could have used the time I have this morning to explore with you. I've chosen instead to explore one of the fundamental challenges that face certainly Wales, I believe the Basque Country and many other European nations, and that is the role that changing patterns of demography play in allowing us to create a future for the metropolis in which people are able to be human and sustainable. And I suppose my opening question, if there were to be a question, and if I were back in my old university job, I would be saying, I would be posing a question at the start of any seminar, and I suppose my question at the start of today's is demography destiny? In other words, are the patterns that we see in Wales and alongside so many European neighbours, are those patterns which shape our future in ways which are simply inescapable? Is the range of democratic choices available to us so narrow because of changing demography that the future has, to all intents and purposes, already been determined by our past? Now, quite certainly the demographic facts in Wales are stark. Wales has an ageing population. The percentage of our population aged over 65, 75, 85 and 95 are all on a sharply upward path. And in Wales we have a reducing population of young people. In 10 years' time, there will be thousands fewer young people in our schools than there are today. And over the last decade, while the population of Wales has grown modestly, that growth is very unevenly distributed across our nation. Urban centres are growing, while rural parts of Wales, the parts of Wales where the Welsh language is strongest and most often spoken in daily life, those parts of Wales are seeing their populations falling. Now, all these patterns, I believe, place us in the European mainstream. The population of Italy fell by 1 million people in the last 12 months alone. And that is the 10th year in a row that the population of Italy has fallen. These are very dramatic population and demographic facts, and I'm certainly not here this morning to argue that these matters are not serious and have to be the object of public policy. But what I am going to attempt to do is to live up to the challenge that was set in the opening contribution, and that is to attempt to be not simply lucid, but optimistic as well. I want to begin by saying that I believe that it is an obligation of political leaders and of thought leaders in the face of major changes in our society, not simply to settle for the politics of despair, the sort of determinism that leads us either to bury our heads in our hands or leaves us prey to the simplistic solutions of authoritarian populists, always looking not for solutions, but for somebody else to blame. It's the responsibility of political leaders to offer our populations hope that the challenges we face, whether that is in climate change or whether it is in demography, a hope that there are solutions which lie within our grasp, which may not eradicate those problems completely, but can make a significant difference. Because unless you are able to approach policy making in that lucid and optimistic way, then populations lose faith in the capacity of us collectively to make a difference which needs to be made in their lives, and then they stop to make the contribution which only they can make and on which the rest of us rely. So what are the elements of a more successful recipe that we might be able to offer from a Welsh perspective? Well, I want to offer you just 4 threads, strands in such a recipe. And the first 2 rest very heavily on the first part of the theme of the seminar, the human theme, because in an era of demographic challenge, our first responsibility has to be to make the maximum use we can of the human capital and the human resources we have already available to us. Now, I said earlier that we have both an aging population and a falling number of young people. Well, how do we address both of those? Well, as far as older people are concerned, it really does rest upon a reorientation of the way that we conceptualize the role of older people in our society. And in particular, it means a move away from regarding older people as a problem to be solved through public policy, and instead to recognize them as an asset in the business of finding solutions. A strengths analysis quickly reveals that our older people in our population offer a huge pool of skills, experience, and economic potential. And in Wales, we aim to capture that potential through our active ageing strategies. Strategies which look to position older people not as the benign object of other people's concern, but as the people they are, people who animate so many aspects of our society already, and who, given the right opportunities and the right policy contexts, are capable of going on being economic actors for much longer than they do today. Now, this is not a suggestion simply for those controversial things, as we see in France today, of extending retirement ages. This is not a strategy that relies on very blunt instruments of that sort. It seeks to recognize that later on in life, people's economic contribution will have to be captured in very different ways. So, to give you 3 examples of that, first of all, we know that older people who have left the workforce may be willing to return to it, provided the basis on which they return is a good deal more flexible than the circumstances in which they left. People are not going to return to work for 35 or 40 hours a week, but they may be prepared to return to work for 10 hours a week. And in Wales, we have some success, for example, in persuading doctors who have retired from full-time work, but who still want to make a contribution, who still feel that they have skills and knowledge and experience that they can put to work, and are prepared to return on that far more flexible basis to go on making that contribution for longer. It's also the case, we find, that when older people return to the workplace, they do not wish to resume the level of responsibility which their careers had reached when they retired. So again, to give you that example from general practitioners, doctors working in the community, by the time you reach an age when you step back from full-time work, you have probably reached the pinnacle of your career. You are leading the team of people in your practice. If you return, it will not be to resume responsibility at that level. People wish to return to the workplace, but in a capacity which allows them to focus on direct, face-to-face, frontline work rather than the managerial responsibilities which people often accumulate as they make their way up a career ladder. So flexibility, not simply in terms of hours worked, but in the sort of responsibilities that you will exercise. And thirdly, we have to, we believe, learn the positive lessons that there are there to be derived from the very difficult experience of the COVID pandemic. The government that I lead, 3/4 of the people who work for the Welsh Government on any one day will now be working remotely from home or in small offices much closer to where they live. And if we are to persuade older people to become active economic actors for longer, then we have to capture those different ways of working so that we're not expecting people to make long and difficult journeys from where they live to the centre of a city alongside thousands of other people attempting to do the same thing at the same time. There are some very positive things that we have learnt from the ways in which people can go on making economic contributions that can be done in a way that is more consistent with the other things that people later in life will be looking to manage, looking to enjoy in their lives. In other words, while we have an aging population, we should not for a moment accept the idea that those people cannot be part of our economic futures in that very positive and contributing way, and there is a lot more that we can do to make those contributions both human and sustainable. I said in opening that we have a falling number of younger people in our population. Now, I sometimes think that the single greatest change in my political lifetime has been this, that for almost the whole time that I've been involved in politics, we thought that one of the greatest challenges we faced was to find work for young people to do. We thought that the shortage in our society would be work, and that the job of government was to create opportunities for young people in education, in volunteering, in the workplace, to make sure that there was activity, meaningful activity, for young people. Well, today, the problem in the economy in Wales is not a shortage of work, it is a shortage of workers. And this, I think, means we have to think very differently about our young people. The excess of young people, of workers more generally, has been at the heart of growing inequality in Western societies. It gave the neoliberals the latitude to drive down wages and to discard young people as unnecessary in a globalized economy. Now, those of us who believe in more equal societies have an opportunity to deploy scarcity to drive up value. The value we attach to all our young people, and especially to those who, left to market forces, find themselves driven to the edge of our economy. So young people in the next decade are going to be amongst the most valuable people we have, and we cannot afford to waste the contribution that a single young person in our society would be prepared to make. And I want to give you just one example this time of the way in which we are trying to make a difference in that area. As in the Basque Country, we have children who cannot be looked after by their own families. They are taken into the care of the state, most often looked after by social services at a local authority level. We know that the outcomes later in life for those young people are likely to be very poor. They are very often to be found amongst the social casualties of Welsh society. They end up disproportionately in the prison population. They end up disproportionately in people who suffer from difficulties of mental health. How can we break that cycle in a way that allows those young people to be active economic actors at a time of demographic change? Well, we are mounting the single biggest experiment in universal basic income anywhere in the world. Over 2 years, every single young person who leaves the care of a local authority in Wales will be provided with a basic income, unconditionally, set at the level of the real living wage. So, compared to most universal basic income experiments, at the generous end of the spectrum. And the policy theory is that with that sort of start to their more independent lives, they will be able to craft for themselves successful futures. They will be able to invest in the sorts of decisions that create a chain of accountability and achievability from where they are today to where they themselves would want to be tomorrow. Now, this experiment, this 2-year experiment, is nearly 1 year old. What are we finding so far amongst those young people who have been given this weekly significant income? Because we could have found, couldn't we, that it was all just one fantastic party in which people took the money and invested it in having a very good time. In fact, what we find is that those young people make investment decisions. They spend the money on things that they think give them better chances of succeeding in future. So they use the money to put down a deposit on a flat so they've got somewhere decent to live. They use the money to enable them to go on a course in a training college which will give them the skills and qualifications that they will need in future. They use the money to pay for driving lessons. It's probably the single biggest use of the money, so that you are mobile in order to be able to take up an offer of a job that otherwise would be denied to you. In other words, offered an opportunity that was otherwise available to them, it is possible, I believe, to use the demographic challenge that we face to maximize the contribution of every young person. Because when people are short, those people are valuable, and it is a responsibility of the state to allow those young people to maximize their chances of shaping their own futures successfully, but also to make their contribution to the wider good of us all. Two more practical ways in which I believe governments looking for that more optimistic future have to act in order to respond positively to the demographic challenge. We have to make the workplace itself more attractive. We certainly have to make it more available to women, and that is by remote working, by proper childcare policies, by affordable housing, by making sure that travel patterns of the future are not simply consistent with what people have grown to expect, but are consistent with the challenges of a planet that is both fragile and in need of care. So all of those things lie in the hands, in Wales, of the regional government, the Welsh government. All of those are things which we can do to make sure that the economic impact of demography is mitigated by making the opportunities for people to be in the workplace more easily available. And my final thread in all of this, and this is a more challenging thread, certainly in the United Kingdom, is that I believe the demographic challenge that we face in Wales, that an aspect of that has to be to make sure that we have a more open economy, an economy that welcomes people from other parts of the world, an economy that is not based on repelling people whose lives have been so challenging in their own part of the world that they seek refugee, asylum, or sanctuary in Wales. We have an ambition as a government to be a nation of sanctuary, in which we reach out in that positive way to people whose lives have been disrupted in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Hong Kong, and of course in Ukraine, where we have some thousands of Ukrainian citizens who now live in Wales. All of those people bring with them talents. All of those people bring with them ambitions. They are all people who we are privileged, I believe, to have amongst us as fellow citizens of Wales. And that fourth strand in how economies like the Basque economy, like the Welsh economy, respond to demographic challenges has to be in communicating that message more widely to the world, that we wish to be open and welcoming, and where necessary, to offer a sense of sanctuary to those whose lives have been made so difficult elsewhere. I wanted to emphasize that fourth point because it brings me to the final theme of this brief presentation. I'm here, Wales is here, because the answers to those challenges of the metropolis of the future quite certainly cannot be found in any one place alone. And while I've suggested some of the answers that we are pursuing in Wales, then I come to the Basque Country as I go elsewhere, far more interested in learning than I am in teaching. We need an alliance of like-minded, progressive governments willing to experiment, to innovate, to share, and to cooperate. And the purpose of being here with our friends in the Basque Country is to do just that. To foster those alliances amongst like-minded people facing common challenges, but whose approach to them rests in that social democratic progressive traditions in which we recognize that the solutions that reach deepest into the lives of our fellow citizens, and particularly solutions that dig deepest into the lives of those who need those solutions the most, are solutions that are based not on competition, but on cooperation, collaboration, and collective solutions for the benefit of individual citizens. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to have discussed some of those matters here today as we work together to find ways of addressing those common challenges in the metropolis, and particularly solutions that live up to what you see on the screen alongside me. Solutions that emphasize our common humanity. Solutions that allow us to create futures that are genuinely sustainable, not simply for the powerful or the privileged or those who already possess many assets in the world, but particularly for those of our fellow citizens who, without that collective effort, will always find themselves at the marginal end of what society has to offer, and for whom, if we don't find different ways of proceeding, sustainability will always be a goal that lies beyond their reach and is the privilege enjoyed by others. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much indeed.